Hello and welcome to the final edition of Questions to Candidates. My name is James Mitchell and I'm the Chair of Elections Committee. We are also joined this evening by the outgoing SU President, Francesco Masala. If you require closed captions, please activate it through Teams. You can also rewatch this later online. This time we shall be putting questions to the presidential candidates covering both their manifestos and issues that affect higher education more broadly. All of you are invited to submit questions in the Q&A panel, and please remember to upvote those questions that you like, so we can put them to the candidates at the end. We will now meet the candidates for President, Rochelle Wabissa, Annie Willingham and Kamakshi Khandelwal. Rochelle, would you please start with your opening statement?
Hello, my name is Rochelle Wabissa and I'm really excited to be running for USU President. And yeah, I guess that's my opening statement.
Well, thank you. Annie, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. So hi guys, I'm Annie. I'm the current education officer, and whilst this has been a wild year, not been together, I've worked really hard to increase transparency within the SU. I've challenged senior management and collaborated with you on campaigns such as the No Detriment and decolonising of the curriculum. I've also worked to enhance accessibility through securing closed caption software and a lecture recording guidance. All of what I do is led by you because I believe that every student matters, and my main aim is to empower and facilitate your actions. So as we embark together on a key transitioning period from COVID to post-COVID, I have the knowledge and confidence to ensure that you'll be safe in my hands as your SU President, but I also bring a new perspective to the President role.
Thank you. Now to meet our final candidate, Kamakshi.
Hi guys, I'm Kamakshi Khandelwal. I'm an international postgraduate student at the university. I'm also the current postgraduate taught course executive committee chair. So I've been working very closely with the postgraduates, but I aim to extend that to the undergraduates and the doctoral students and everyone at the university. And since I'm an international student, a lot of what is written in my manifesto and a lot of what I'll be talking about today comes from personal experiences and the scope I see for the student union in the coming term.
Thank you very much. Now let's move on to our questions. Our first question is, do you have a position on the current NUS referendum? Annie, would you like to start?
Yes, of course. So my personal position is to remain in the NUS. I believe that there's power in collectivism and joining together as a movement. I also believe that the work of SUs is stronger when we're done together in collaboration rather than just as isolation as an SU. But I also believe that fundamentally that those larger SUs such as Bath should help facilitate movements in higher education across the sector for smaller SUs and further education colleges. For me personally, NUS has been a big part of my uni experience as I've been NUS delegate for a couple of years. I appreciate that there are challenges with the transparency of what NUS does. But I think as president, that's something that I would love to work to do so that you can meet the NUS presidents, and I can completely understand the argument for leave that the students have that came up at the debate, but and the main debate there around the SU's financial position. But I do think that as an SU we can look at diversifying our income. But at the end of the day, the SU is a democracy, so while students deserve to know my position, will be led by whatever students decide to do, because that's the job of the SU president.
Thank you. Kamakshi, what do you think?
I understand the both views on the case, but personally, I think I am with being a part of the NUS only because I think, even though I think you did pose this question during the interview, that we have a cost of around 30,000 grand a year. I understand that part, but I am looking at the more long-term plan and the fact that considering the COVID period, the student union hasn't been able to do a lot of stuff this year, and they've been not in a very good financial position. So I feel that it can be a great way, like remaining with the NUS can be a great way to lobby the UK government to get a lot of financial support so that we can recover from the COVID trauma. And yeah, I personally think it's a good idea. But as Annie said, I'm completely with the view of the students. All of us have personal opinions, but when you are running up for a stage where you want to represent students, you have to consider their views and opinions and work on those. So I'm definitely with what the students go with.
Rochelle, what do you think?
So I'm still researching everything, and I still personally haven't voted either stay or leave because I'm still kind of trying to understand like what I want to decide. Like I see that like staying in is great and stuff, and it's got lots of like fundamental things, and leaving feels weird because it's like leaving because of the cost is like, is that really enough reason? So I can see both arguments, but I'm still like deliberating and trying to understand the situation before I cast my vote, because I think we got till Thursday to decide. And in all honesty, as SU president, like whatever the students decide, I will work towards the idea. But like just like many students, like I really don't know which way I'm gonna vote yet. So once I make a decision, I'll definitely tell everyone, but until then, like, I don't know.
Thank you. Well, now a personal question. What do you think will be the biggest challenge in the role if you were voted in? Rochelle, would you like to start on this one?
I think the biggest challenge that'll be in the role is transitioning from fighting the university for stuff and moving into collaborating with the university stuff, because I feel like usually when you say the university, we forget that there's people you have to talk to make change. And I think the transition from like a battle between us versus them will definitely be the biggest challenge. Is something that I want to like go, because my whole campaign and my whole vision is about collaboration and is about working together. So I think making those meaningful connections with people and like talking to students more will be really, really hard, but it's going to be so worth it. So yeah, when it comes to what the biggest challenge of the role would be, is be connecting with the community again in a meaningful way, and not just having a wall for everything, but actually like talking to each other and finding a resolution that everybody will be happy with.
Thank you. Kamakshi, what do you think would be the biggest challenge for you?
Personally, I believe, as Rachel said, that it's the physical engagement bit. Also considering the post-COVID period, where since the lockdown rules will go off, we might bring back in-person teaching. So ensuring safety measures, the fact that our students comfortable in an environment where they're now with people. That's why I focus a lot on the mental health aspect as well, because everyone has been in lockdown. Personally, I haven't been able to go back to India during this time. So considering that shift in mindset and meeting people, so how as an SU president will you get the community together and bring it back to normal? Like obviously you cannot go back to how it was last year, but you can try and do your best to bring everyone together.
Thank you. And you, Annie?
So I think the biggest challenge as SU president is going to be coming out of COVID and looking at the SU's the financial position. It's been seen that there is concerns at the moment, but also looking at things like the wider student experience, like buses, because we know that First is in financial difficulty. So how are we going to ensure that our students can actually get to campus, and what are we going to be doing to make sure that they feel safe, that they're happy to be back, but also that they're supported, because we don't know the impacts of COVID, and we don't know that the impacts that it's going to have on our student body, especially in terms of mental health. So yeah.
Thank you. And now, what do you think the priority of the SU should be going forward in light of COVID-19 and the new normal? Annie, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, of course. So I think we have learnt so much this year. We know that pre-COVID didn't work for everybody, and so that's one of the lessons that we need to learn. So we know that, for example, our distance learners were shut out and weren't engaged, so the virtual offer that we now have is a lot more accessible. We also know that there were struggles with disabled students, so moving forward, and what we learned from COVID is that we need to continue breaking down those barriers, but also realise that action can be taken. So that the university have always said, no, that's not going to happen. We can't record lectures X, Y, and Z, but it has happened, and we need to not settle for no as an answer anymore.
Thank you. And Rochelle, how about you?
Could you ask me the question again, please?
What do you think the priority of the SU should be in light of COVID-19 and the new normal?
Honestly, the best thing is definitely connecting with students again. Like, I feel like it's time that we, as Annie said, change and bring connections and identify barriers in service provisions for the most vulnerable students. Like, I'm one of those students. I am the disabled student, the distance learner, the person who's had a mum with cancer, so I've had to take care of that. Like, all those changes, none of it will really matter unless we have a good connection with students. The students know that if something's going wrong, they know how to navigate the system in order to approach. My whole thing is about individual solution. Individual problems deserve individual solutions. So instead of being we can do both. We can make sure we address the challenges through big campaigns, making this university commit to continue recording lectures, supporting students any way we can, but also giving students opportunities to be hey, this is my problem. Because when it comes to when you're minority disability students or refugee student, the barriers that you're gonna have to deal with, the group way of solving things and the problems that are gonna go to pass, they won't touch you. You need individual solutions. So I think the biggest thing that needs to go on next moving forward is definitely connecting with students, and individual problems deserve individual solutions. Yeah.
And Kamakshi, what's your point of view on this?
I believe that, so I had taken this short poll yesterday during my Instagram takeover, where I asked people about a few questions that I have put up on my manifesto. So one of the questions that I asked the students and the community was that, do they feel a part of the student community? And surprisingly, 43% said that they still don't feel a part of the community. Major reasons could be that they couldn't come down to Bath due to the COVID restrictions. A few of them are here, they couldn't go back home. So I think a major thing would be that everyone feels a part of the student community. I mean, that's what the SU wants, that's what the university wants. So bringing that back together, getting that 43% a part of the other 57% is what we want to see.
Thank you. Now, Franchi has some questions for you.
Thank you, James. Now we're going on to some role-specific questions about the role of president. So the first one is, what do you think the SU approach to staff strikes should be at the university, and what is your personal view? Starting with Rochelle.
So when it comes to staff strikes, I think the biggest people who get hit the most is probably the social work students who, as soon as they strikes, all their staff goes, so they don't really get value for money. I think my opinion is, well, I'm tired of strikes and I'm tired of missing out on lots of university because of strikes. So when it comes to how we will handle that, I feel like it's time we start sorting the problems early and talking to staff early as possible. So students don't catch out, because it's like two parents fighting. If your parents are fighting, why am I getting involved in all this drama? But in all seriousness, I feel like it's time that when it comes to strikes, the university needs to work with their staff and have that conversation, instead of us being dragged in the middle of this fight that we did not sign up for.
Thank you. Annie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I believe that staff striking, especially with the trade unions, it's a very I suppose like critical point that we need to address, because we have postgraduates who are part of UCU, and therefore we are representing students who might also be striking. So we need to be making sure that they are supported if that is the decision that goes ahead. But I also appreciate on the other half, we have a large number of undergraduate students which will be affected. And like Rochelle said, there are clusters of students within that who are even more affected. And some students will remember the strikes from previous years, and they'll also remember that their friends had strikes and they didn't have lectures for a while, but they were in lectures, because it just depends on the cohort. So personally, I think we need to continue the relationships that this year I've built up with the chair of UCU for Bath, and keep those communications open, so that if we see things happening nationally with UCU, we can engage in those conversations early on, and we can also put it down to students for a referendum to see whether the students choose to support or not support, and as SU president follow on from that.
Thank you very much. And now on to Kamakshi.
Yeah, I agree to what Rachel and Annie say, and I just believe that you shouldn't come to a point where you're thinking about the after effects of the strike and what will you do as a president. I think what you should think early on is to prevent the whole situation, which is pretty much possible with constant communication, constant feedbacks. I think if we come up with a platform to be able to do that, we can avoid a lot of situations, not just like staff strikes, but just like everything else that affects the community as a whole.
Could I just come in quickly?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah, so responding to what you've just said, this year nationally, we saw that UCU wanted to strike because they deemed in-person teaching not safe for staff to be on campus. But our Bath UCU did put it to a referendum. They felt that they were safe, but the impact that would have, or that we saw at students' unions across the country, where that meant that their students who were craving in-person teaching and wanted to be surrounded by their peers, even though it was social distance, were losing out on IPT. So I'm interested into how you would go about that, because you're essentially, the students would be the ones missing out if you always side with the trade unions.
Honestly, I'm not saying I'm siding with the trade unions, because as I said early on, that I'm an international student. So with personal experience, I think we are affected like the most of it, because we were promised like in-person trainings, for example, for 4 hours. And that's why most of us came down from other countries. But then we realized that the School of Management faculties did not want to work on it. So what I'm trying to say is that we should have, whereas, for example, I'll give you a very short example, like the School of Psychology, they had the faculties coming in, whereas the management one said they did not want to. So I think we should have one policy that applies to all, because then as international students, we feel excluded for the fact that, one school is getting the privileges, whereas we are paying the same amount, we are coming from the same community, but we are the ones who are excluded from that learning. So I'm not siding with the trade unions. I'm definitely in for the students coming from personal experience. I'm not siding with that. I'm just saying we should try and avoid that and come up with a common policy for all.
May I say, just, I guess when I'm like listening to what you guys are saying and reflecting, I think if there is a strike, whatever happens, the best thing we can do is show students how they can navigate student services so they can get the support that they deserve. If they're anxious about not getting in-person teaching and like they're not feeling that facilities are enough for them to learn, contact disabilities, know how to disclose a disability, know how to get free therapy, so you can like talk about your anxieties and the change and stuff like that. I cannot predict whether or not there are going to be strikes. I cannot solve the relationship between students and between the staff and the university and the trade unions. I can't solve that. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that helping students now understand how to navigate the system, talk to their tutors about how they can make sure they get the best out of their abilities, best out of their degree, and also how to make complaints so that meaningful, so they can get what they want now. I feel like that would be more meaningful for students. So whatever happens with trade unions and strikes and stuff like that, at least the student themselves, whoever they are getting the support that they deserve. So that's how I'm feeling when I'm thinking about the strikes. But yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we have to move on to our next question, which is a hypothetical question regarding transport, which is one of the remits of the SU president. So in a hypothetical scenario, First is in dire financial challenges and it may have to drastically increase the price of bus passes next year to stay afloat. As SU president, what would you do? Starting with Kamachi.
I believe that first, because I think I was having a look at the previous SU's policies and things they wanted to do, and I think bus services as general has come up as a constant one every year. So I just feel like talking to First and figuring out a way, because I think that the main part that we are a part of NUS, we can get the extra funds. We can kind of sponsor like half of the tickets. Like, I'm not saying that we are giving out the complete tickets, because if First decides to increase the price, our first step can be that we go talk to them. Our second step, if First doesn't agree, is to support the students still. So what we can do as an SU is figure out a way for other mediums of transport, or just kind of cut down half of the price to help them out, because we want the students to be happy.
Thank you. Moving on to Rochelle.
When it comes to First buses, it has been something that's always been on manifestos, and it's not on mine because, again, individual problems deserve individual solutions. So my focus, how to deal with First Bus, is to make sure that students understand how they can get funding to compensate for any increase. So if you're struggling financially and you can't afford to pay for the full bus pass, like talking to money advice so you can get like a bursary. I remember when I was in my summer internship and I couldn't afford to travel to my internship, I was given like a little bursary, so I was able to like pay for like an Uber to travel to my internship. And I think when it comes to First buses, it's going to be difficult to change them, but what we can do is help students now, and through using the university services, because once it's a problem for universities, then they're going to go above and beyond to solve the problem for us. So instead of like focusing on First Bus and attacking them, trying to lobby them or anything like that, let's focus on telling students to use the services in a meaningful way so they can get what they want, and the university can do the rest if it becomes a problem for them.
Thank you, Rochelle. And Annie.
Do you mind just repeating the question? I feel like we've steered away a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a hypothetical scenario. So First is in dire financial challenges and it may have to drastically increase the price of bus passes next year to stay afloat. As SU president, what would you do?
Okay, well, first of all, I've addressed this in my manifesto because as much as we wish it's a hypothetical situation, I believe it's one that we're going to be facing when it comes around, because First is in financial trouble. I spoke to the Chief Operating Officer of the university about this when writing my manifesto as well, to see what support the university will have to be putting in place, because we've already seen that the U3 route this year has been suspended. We saw the bus pass, which is way over £300. If Bath continues with a Bath blend, which means students are going to be on campus even less than normal, how can we justify paying that money for a bus that is late or that there's reduced services? And I mean, we also know that previous years there have been the issues with buses and they have started to be resolved. This year we haven't seen it because there's been reduced campus activity on campus. But how I'll address it as SU president is working early with First, ensuring that First and the university are in discussions. I think as SU president, it's not for me to go in and solve it. It's for the university for like us as a body to hold the university to account, to make sure that the post-COVID like transition back to campus is matched by the correct bus service demand.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to. Wait, hold on. Have I gone through all the candidates? Yeah, okay, cool. Sorry, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is about freedom of speech. So there has been an increased coverage concerning freedom of speech in students' unions. How do you think the SU should approach this issue? Starting with Danny.
Okay. So, of course, I fully support the need for freedom of speech. And I know here at Bath, we do have the formal process to have external speakers come in. And I have looked into this, and I know that last year, although it was cut short from COVID, there were 78 requests that went forward, and none of the speakers were no platformed. So therefore, whilst this issue of freedom of speech has come up nationally, we don't see it happening here at Bath. But likewise, across the sector, when they looked at 10,000 events, only 6 of those events were cancelled, and this was mainly due to administrative errors. So the crisis that the government have declared is inaccurate, in my opinion, and their response isn't proportionate to the issue. There's a bit of a bigger concern here, which is why the government have remained silent for the whole of the pandemic on issues relating to students, but have decided to speak up about this. And it is really interesting to see how the proposal for the free speech champion plans out, and whether this is part of the government censoring what universities and SUs can do, which is an issue in itself. In terms of what the SU can do, so one of the ideas that I would have is to hold a debate week where we can have all views can be represented fairly. But as an SU, I do think that we need to remain proud of the work that we do every day, encourage debates and champion the marginalised voices to be heard and protect them from hate speech.
Thank you, Annie. I'm just going to follow up on this really quickly. How would you apply what you've just described in terms of the context of free speech to highly controversial speakers being invited to speak on campus?
So I think if we, as an SU, we also have we need to be protecting our students. So in terms of having highly controversial speakers here, I think it's part of having the debate in place and making sure it's facilitated correctly, and make sure that it's not turning into hate speech, but it's a fair debate, essentially.
Thank you. Moving on to Kamakshi, same first question to you. So how do you think the SU should approach the increasing coverage about freedom of speech in students' unions?
I feel like similar to Annie, I am completely with the fact that students should be able to voice out their opinions, and not only students, like the people we have over on campus should be able to speak what they want freely. And just I know there's this other side that says that, you know, there might be comments or issues which turn into hate speech, but we obviously do have policies for that. So I believe, like similar to Annie, as an SU president, I would love for the student union to be hosting a lot of activities that promotes ways that students can talk to each other, communicate freely, voice out their opinions, find solutions to them, and just interact with each other.
Thank you, Kamakshi. And in terms of the follow-up, would you take the same approach as Annie in terms of controversial speakers being invited on campus?
I believe, like, just the fact that we have a lot of hate speech policies as well. I feel like inviting them over should be a good idea, because when you're saying that you support free speech, you cannot like just ask someone not to come and say what they want. But we always, I think we should address it on case-to-case basis. I mean, obviously we see who is coming in, and then obviously we can give them a heads up on, you know, you should be careful about, just like, because you know the agenda when someone is coming to speak. So you can just kind of take the measures of seeing that it does not turn into hate speech. But obviously I think we should have them over and let them speak what they want.
Thank you, Kamakshi. Rochelle, on to you.
Personally, I think it's a great idea to have freedom of speech champions and to invite controversial thinkers here at the university, because for many reasons, like, I know, you know, firstly, because, well, I'm a person of color and I'm a minority. Like, I know, like, controversial topics are gonna happen whether or not they're, you know, perfect, amazing speakers come at the university and they're here to talk. Like, it's going to happen anyway. Inviting those speakers to have their conversations and to say what they need to say, and people can, like, you know, have an open discussion, is how we're going to breed change and see where people stand on things. Because again, everybody here is paying $9 grand a year, and, you know, international students are paying way more money. If you want a controversial person to come here, you can have it, as long as people realize that freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequence. If you invite a speaker and they are directly disrespectful to a particular student, or they're rude, or they're, you know, just kind of like trying to make people feel uncomfortable when in an open discussion, like that's when I'm going to be like, no, because we have the dignity and respect policies that which they have to kind of like follow through. And I guess to conclude, I feel like, yes, freedom of speech, great. I love an idea of a champion. I will want that champion to ensure that they're immersed in the university culture so they understand the needs of the community and the faith and cultural people at this university. So they are ensuring that the people that are invited are briefed on the kind of like community we are, and like to be aware that there's a diverse audience they're going to be talking to. Like whatever they have to say, they have to make sure they're respectful.
Can I quickly come back in?
Yeah, sure.
So with the freedom of speech champion, from my understanding, it's the regulator who has the freedom of speech champion is linked to the regulator, which is OFS. So it means that the individual would complain to the regulator, who can then fine universities and the SU. So as an SU, that freedom of speech champion and as president being in charge of the financial responsibility of the SU, it could add a lot of issues with the board of trustees that you're part of. So just wanted to add that one in there, which is why I think that there's also the additional issue of if a complaint goes through to OFS and the freedom of speech champion, it can clash with the policies that the university already have in place. So there is quite a big clash between, whilst I fully support the need for free speech, that's the actual clash of that freedom of speech champion and the university and SUs and their power and what it's going to censor them doing.
Oh no, I think I understand that. I just feel that we also need our own freedom of speech champion who is able to debrief and ensure people know what's going on. So like, instead of just like, before people go onto the complaints and that kind of stuff, we have a freedom of speech champion who is engaged with the university and understands how the university works and how the communities work, so they can deal with problems early and make sure that if we do have controversial speakers, I want them to know that there are things they can and cannot do in terms of like, oh, you can't go out and like say the N-word randomly to a student or anything like that. You can't be disrespectful to the people already here. You can say what you wish, and people who want to be in that position and want to hear your thoughts can go. But if you don't want to go, you don't have to, as long as the person who's invited is respectful to every single person they come in contact to, especially and aware that like, yeah, you don't want to be rude and make people feel uncomfortable if they're not involved in your talk. That's hopefully we have the same understanding there.
We're gonna have to move on to the next question, if that's okay. So the next one is about no detriment. So the national approach to no detriment has shifted due to universities' concern around academic standards. So why do you think the university would approve another year of no detriment after this year? Starting with Kamakshi.
I think personally, I don't know, being an international student, I still have like mixed opinions on this. So I would like, before I say out anything in person to everyone watching, I think I would personally want to research a bit more, talk to the university staff, and then get back to you on this.
Thank you. Moving on to Rochelle.
So what I mean when I say expand on a non-detriment policy is I think we need to move forward with what's already working. Things like no evidence needed for extensions would be so meaningful to students, because it means that you can just get on with your life, apply for an extension if you need it, and you don't have to find all this data for it. And transparency around negotiating mandatory units, alternative assessments, and like moving units would be so good, because it means students won't be trapped in a degree they don't like or units they're not passionate about. They can actually follow what they want to do. And when it comes to like no evidence needed for mitigating circumstances, which is in my manifesto, like all that means like in terms of like a cover letter to justify mitigate circumstances, because I think like, you know, if it's good enough for Student Finance England to give you a year, a gift year, then it's good enough for the university. Like expanding on non-detriment policy like in that way is a good way to keep to have meaningful impact on students.
Can I jump in quickly?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Rishad, I just had a question. So I understand that your manifesto is a lot around mental health and students, but do you feel like not giving, you know, reasons for extensions of deadlines and stuff, students might tend to take advantage of that? Like just the fact that when you know that right now, like you do have to, you know, state why you want an extension whatsoever. So you know that you cannot lie. But when we have a policy like you're proposing, students might just take complete advantage of that, and like, not if they know that they're not working till the end moment, they might just be like, okay, we have a policy, so we don't really need to. And that kind of affects the people who genuinely have such circumstances. So what's your take on that?
My take is we do not know what people are personally going through. We don't. And making people who are vulnerable fill out all this paperwork and justify all their trauma, relive their trauma, just so they can have that little extra time to do their assignment. I don't think it's worth it. Yes, people might take advantage. Like that could happen, of course. But at the same time, like, students' mental health is more important, and I'd rather students not have to traumatize themselves, like reliving their like all their issues, and like have to justify themselves and give all this evidence, just have a bit more time. And I just have all these vulnerable students to just be able to be like, I need more time. I don't want to explain my reasons. Okay. And yes, if students take advantage of it, like, extensions are not going to give you better grades. Like, not really. They're not going to like magically bump up your grade amazingly, but they're going to give people time to process what's going on in their life and deal with them in a meaningful way, rather than burn themselves out on an assignment that, like, your mental health always comes first and then your degree. That's just how I feel. And I get that, you know, people might take advantage. I agree with you. But again, the mental health of students is more important.
I think I'm kind of with the mental health idea as well, because that's the main point I'm promoting in my manifesto, where I have put it as an anonymous platform where students can come share their problems. But I just feel like coming up with a policy which is same for everyone just makes it vulnerable for people who are genuinely suffering it. Like, I know you said that, you know, it wouldn't change your grade, but it gives you time. Like, if I have a week to do, you should have a week to, unless of course you have mitigating circumstances. So
thank you. Sorry, I'm gonna have to kind of like cut this a little bit short, and we're gonna have to let Annie say her bit as well. So Annie, on to you.
Thank you. So obviously this is what I've worked on this year. So Rochelle, where you've said your point about the no evidence for extensions, it is continuing, and we've currently got the university to work with developing a software. So HSS are already have it implemented, and it's hoping to be rolled out for the rest of the student body across the different faculties. So that's one point that's already been addressed. But in terms of not submitting evidence, this time last year I sat on questions to candidates for education officer, and that was my main priority, and it's something that the self-certification that I have pushed for incredibly hard this year, and it's one of the toughest things that I've probably learned, is that actually the reasons why evidence is needed is because that is how the university managed to support a lot of the students, and so there is a place here for it not needing to be medical evidence. It doesn't need to be formal evidence, but whilst we can look at no detriment and self-certification of extensions and allow students to hopefully it will be one a semester, sorry, where they will not require any evidence. We also need to look at the processes forward. So looking at no detriment, I think this also means in future years looking at how COVID has impacted this cohort, so that if you're in first year when you go to graduate, or first year's not the best example, second year and you go to graduate, if this year's had an impact, how that will happen, but also looking at the students that are about to graduate, what career opportunities are we going to have there to support them?
I think I have a question about the policy that you just said in terms of extensions. Like, so the one that you've been working on, would it mean that, you know, you still have to put evidence in? Like, how many times can you ask for an extension?
That's down to the university to announce when it's finally announced. I'm not here to say that right now, but what we've been working on with the university and the different faculties is to make sure that it's equal across the whole university, so that we don't see what's happened right now, which is HSS have it, but the rest of the other departments don't.
When it comes to extensions for pharmacy students, like if you ask for extension and you give your reasons, usually you have to come to a panel to justify why, to continue your practice and things. And I think, honestly, I'm gonna summarize. I'm gonna be like, I said what I said. No evidence needed for extensions, and I feel like that should be across the board. Like, I don't want to have more paperwork for no reason. I just want to say, if you want an extension, you can get it. Like, sometimes when you apply for extension, it doesn't mean you're going to get the support that you need. Like, it doesn't. At least my experience is I just apply for extension. Like well-being doesn't contact me to check in if I'm okay. Money advice doesn't come in and check in on me if I'm okay. And I think what's important is if there's no evidence need for extensions, students can just actually go direct to the services that they need support for and get help. And that's just what I'm trying to fight for. Well,
thank you. This is a really important debate, and I really hope that we continue that throughout the campaigning week, but we have to move on with the next questions, and also we want to get to the questions from our students. We still have one question that we can do from our role-specific president area. So, and this is the question. As SU president, you would be the chair of the SU's board of trustees, a governor of the university, as well as a student representative. How will you navigate the multiple roles you have to play to ensure you're fulfilling all of your duties? Starting with Danny.
So in this case, I have the experience of this year behind me already. I've been able to challenge senior management when being governor on council already and holding the reputational risk of the university, but also being aware of the challenges that we have as a students' union and being on the board of trustees for 1 year already. And it's the way you approach the scenario that you are faced with does have to alter, but it's also can work in your favour. And I think being able to play that system very cleverly this year is how we've managed to secure a lot of the wins that we have. So I'd continue with that.
Thank you. Moving on to Kamakshi.
I think it comes down to dedication towards your role and how much you want it and you're willing to do it. And I just feel like everything that I have done in the past or continue to do, I put my 100% in. So I'm pretty much good at multitasking and giving everything the required attention it needs, whether it's me working at lights, that's my lookout, but I get the job done. So I think that shouldn't be very difficult for me, considering I'll also have a team to work with, which I really look forward to. So I think it should be okay.
Thank you, Kamakshi. Rochelle?
So I am a Gold Scholar, Lloyd Scholar, Set Squared Ambassador. I'm a Wellbeing Ambassador. I'm also like a chair of the anti-racist group where I hold senior staff members accountable for any equality and diversity things. Like I already hold lots of hats. It may not be as, you know, I appreciate Annie. I'm so grateful that she's been an amazing education officer wearing so many hats. Like my hats are very much within the university, and in terms of like how I'd be able to connect, the leverage I have is that I already built those connections with those people who you know, part of these trustees and boards, and I have to like network with them because I'm a Gold Scholar and I have to build those relationships with them. And it's like I already know how to handle lots of different hats. And the thing is, I'll be able to do that in a meaningful way because I've already connected with these people on a personal level, which means it moves me at a better advantage to negotiate things and to ensure students' needs come first. Because they're like, it's not just some random person asking them for stuff. It is somebody who has worked with them, worked on projects with them, and respects them and has, you know, a stake at the university because the university pays for my scholarship to be here. So that's how I'd be able to do it, like, because I've already got the experience within the university doing it.
Thank you all. We're going to move on to the manifesto-specific segment of the questions to candidates.
Fantastic. Now, Annie, one for you. Your manifesto says that you will ensure the university mitigates the academic impact of COVID. How are you going to do this?
So I think this is building off the work that I've done this year. So it will be whoever is as education officer next year, it's supporting them in that position, and a lot of the work that I've done this year building up the relationships with the university to make sure that they're not just responding to what has happened, but are looking forward at what is essentially what is going to happen, the trends of this, and how it's going to be mitigated would be by keeping the communication with academic registry open, holding the university to account, but also listening to students, because I think their needs will change very much throughout the year, and we'll see a different demand from postgraduates of what support they need, but also for the next year's cohorts, when we have first years come back in, they'll have been out of exams for quite a long time, so additionally providing additional support there.
Fantastic.
Rochelle, this one is specifically for you. So the president's role oversees events, particularly large ones such as Freshers' Week and Masquerade Ball. Given that this has not been addressed in your manifesto, how do you think the yearly calendar of events in the SU can be improved?
How I feel like it could be improved is that I think there needs to be more quality instead of quantity, because I feel like every time I've had experience with events at university, I've become so overwhelmed because everybody was doing so many different things and everything was happening all at once. I think how we'll improve in it is by making sure that students, and like there is a dedicated campaign that like ensures the message is transferred through the whole university. Like events, especially with now, we don't know what the summer holds. Like I'm looking forward for like, you know, COVID restrictions to release so we can all go back on campus drinking Pims and relaxing by the lake. But at the same time, like once I'm in the role, then I'll be able to make an informed decision about what's going on. But until then, like we already get trained once we become SU president and we understand how the formal procedures work. And I think when it comes to events and things, I want to add quality, but at the same time, like I want to be in the role so I can see what the university has to plan and collaborate anywhere I can. Hopefully that answers your question. And yeah, whoever asks this question, feel free to message me and I will definitely answer it if and any further questions you have. Thank you.
And now, Kamakshi, you want academics to be available outside of the current timetabled hours. How would you approach a conversation with academic staff on this issue?
I believe that an online, I just wanted like a platform where you know that there's someone listening to you outside the 9 to 5 time. So as I said, that I want to come up with like an online platform where students can post in their problems and there's someone instead of an automated reply, because sometimes when you get an automated reply, you don't know whether someone's actually listening to you or not. Just the fact that knowing that someone will get back to you in some time or they're just there for you, I think I would want to come up with like an online site or an app where they can work on it and just post their problems freely, because a lot of students have problems apart from just like academics and mental health issues. They just have a lot of problems in general, and we as a student union should be open to listen to all of them.
Could I just come in quickly?
Yes, certainly.
So essentially the platform that you're describing is what student services have with Be Well Talk now, where there is someone available to talk 24/7 and it's available in lots of different languages. So I'm wondering what you're suggesting and how it's different to what student services have already provided this year.
So I think Glenn did ask me this question in the interview before as well. At least if with the online platform, like how I wasn't aware of it, a lot of international students aren't aware of it. So at least get the reach to the students. I think that's very important because we get a lot of emails and sometimes we tend to miss the important ones and sometimes we genuinely need them but we can't find them. So increasing the marketing online, talking to students, getting the physical engagements done, talking to them in person when the lockdown opens. I think doing a lot of those activities to get the existing student union activities to them.
Brilliant, thank you. Right then, now it's time to move on to some questions from our audience. So to start with, we've got a question here asking, if you want to be able to use students to support students during strikes, is there enough provision for this so that everyone can get the help they need? Rochelle, do you want to answer this one?
Honestly, what I'm going to say this is, so if more people are asking for support, the university will make the provisions in place because they'll see a need. So like, instead of worrying about whether or not there's capacity, if there's more of us who are requesting that support, then the student services will have like the data to show, oh, maybe we need to expand on the service because all these students are asking for this support. So that's why I'm focusing on using the services, because if people aren't using the services, like when the year funding comes through, they'd be like, oh, well, let's cut that because not all students use it. But if all of us are going, we need this, we need to deal with this, the strikes are having this impact on us, then student services will have to change. And that's what I'm bringing to the table. Like, I'm not your usual candidate who's like done SU stuff or like all that kind of stuff. I'm an outside candidate. Like, I'm coming in and being like, let's use the services. Let's make them change for us. Let's say what we want and say, I said what I said. I want this and I want this now. And they're the ones who have to facilitate it. They're the ones who have to work it out and make sure that you get the support that you deserve. And yeah, I'm very passionate about student well-being.
Okay.
That's how I do it.
Thank you. And now another issue that's come up is around sustainability. So if you could do one thing to improve sustainability on campus, one realistic thing you think you could achieve next year if successful, what would it be? And Annie, do you want to start?
Yeah, of course. So I've addressed sustainability on my manifesto. And I think it's quite a crucial thing that we're all very aware of, and I know that our student body are very eager to be making changes. One thing that's on my manifesto, I've spoken to people in Planet about it, I've spoken to the Director of Accommodation and Hospitality Services about this, is to introduce a zero waste store on campus. There are plans at the moment where it's in talks, it might be happening, but I think we need to make sure it becomes a reality, but not only that it remains affordable, and that we can work with people in Planet so that they are able to support the university and how to educate our student body. So it's not just oh, you should be doing this, it's actually there for them, so it becomes part of the life on campus.
Kamakshi, what would you do?
I think honestly, as much as we talk about sustainability, there are a lot of people who still don't understand its importance. So my first priority would be first raising the awareness, because as much as we tell people, interacting with them, giving them experiences or stories of how it affects us in the long run, giving them that first and then implementing policies is what I would go for. Because unless you can do everything, you can implement everything. If you think it's important, you can come up with, as Annie's saying, you can come up with a zero waste store. But if I don't understand the need for it, I wouldn't do it. So I would go for the awareness first and then go for the other policies.
Thank you. And Rochelle?
The first thing I would do I would take all these policies and procedures and strategies that they're doing for sustainability, and I'll take it to assistive technology and ask them how they can make that as accessible as possible. Because if everybody can make an informed decision about what the university are doing and they can actually understand the paperwork, they'll be able to raise their voice and say what they think should be done for sustainability. Because we have all this paperwork, all these documents, and they're so difficult to understand, especially when you're a disabled student and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed by everything. First thing, make the paperwork accessible. Make it so everybody knows what's going on and can easily know what's going on by collaborating with people who are qualified to make things as accessible as they can for everyone, regardless of disability or accessibility, and also collaborating with, diversity and widening participation to make sure the communication is accessible to all cultures, all languages, and things like that. Because I think what we struggle at university is everything is in English. Not everybody speaks English. Like English is like my second language, like Swahili is my first. And I think it's time that we make those policies and procedures accessible to this diverse and completely amazingly diverse university.
Thank you. Now, as your last question, could you each answer in no more than 30 seconds? If you could change one thing at university, unlimited by resource or barriers, what would you do? And Rochelle, do you want to start?
Unlimited by resource.
So you don't have to worry about any constraints that you normally would have to.
I think I would increase the amount of money you pay ambassadors. I would make it way more money than it is. So every ambassador who takes on a role is actually paid I don't know, maybe £25 an hour. So for their time, so they can have money to do stuff. And I think why my reason for choosing that is whatever I decide, I want to make sure that students are the one who are benefiting for it. And if all the ambassadors are being paid £25 an hour, we'll have and actually being able to have money for doing more money to do stuff. I just think that would be really cool.
Thank you. Annie?
My one thing would be getting students back to campus and having Freshers Week or Summer Ball, but holding a big style of festival event to bring everybody back together, especially for first years who have missed out on a normal Freshers Week, but also for final years and all students who have missed out this year.
And how about you, Kamakshi? What would you change?
The thing that I would change is celebrate all the festivals for all the communities, because I was really fascinated by how the Lunar Year was celebrated this year, even though it was online. I just believe we are a diverse community. We have people from everywhere, and if we can value and celebrate each person, I think they'll feel so much more valued. So I would just have fun, celebrate all kinds of festivals.
Thank you. Some fantastic ideas there. Now, Kamakshi, would you like to give us a closing statement?
So if you need someone who can celebrate your culture, someone who brings the international community together, someone who focuses on mental health problems, because I plan on coming up with an online platform where you can post your problems anonymously, but you have to put in your user ID, which will go directly to the university. So we only get your problems, but in case of harassment, we have that in place as well. So if you need someone who listens to you, talks to you, is there for you always, vote for me. Looking forward to.
Annie?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say I'm very thrilled to be up against two very different candidates who both bring a very unique perspective to life at Bath and their journey here at Bath. If elected, I'd hope that I can work with them to learn from their campaign experiences and help implement some of their manifesto pledges. But in the last year, I've learned that being an officer is about empowering, energising and engaging students. Together, we make up a very diverse and determined community. So if you want to achieve with Annie, vote Annie for SU President, and together we can achieve more.
And Rochelle, would you like to finish for us?
I'd like to say thank you, everybody, for this amazing opportunity. I'm really enjoying this campaign. I wanted to say that, like, you know, I'm bringing something new to the table. Like, I'm bringing something completely new to the table, and that's what my advantage is. Like, the SU for a long time, in my feeling, has not really connected with people like me. Like, I've always felt like an outsider, and I thought this was an opportunity to kind of be like, you know what, since I'm on the outsider, I'm going to do something about it. And I really hope that students see that I'm passionate about this, and I'll bring something to the table. And if things I don't understand, I'm willing to do the training, because the rules are anybody is meant to be able to be SU president, whether or not you have experience in the SU or not, anybody. But it's been a long time since an outsider has become SU president. And I think it's time that an outsider did come in, did make radical change that was meaningful to students. And I hope that comes across to people. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Annie. And thank you, Kamakshi. Voting for officers starts midday on Tuesday, and voting in the NUS referendum is currently open. Remember that for every 10 votes, 1 tree will be planted as part of the Plant Your Vote campaign, with various milestones along the way. If we beat last year's number of votes, we get to help adopt a whale. So keep your votes rolling in, make sure you have your say, and contribute to student democracy. Thank you to all our candidates again, and thank you for watching. Tune in again on Friday evening at 6 o'clock for the announcement of results. So it's goodbye from me, goodbye from Francesco, and goodbye from all of us at the SU.